I think we're in a moment where we really need to focus on what people are doing proactively to fight all of the BS. And so I just wanted to talk to you. We had months ago, we had Mohammed Khatami on from No Tech for Apartheid, who was working at Google. And I believe, while his coworkers were being fired over voicing opposition to Google's complicity and working with the IDF in Israel on, all kinds of new ways to murder people and whatnot. But you come at it from a different angle. Tell us who you are and what happened when, this assault popped off, and like what happened in your community and sort of the tech community broadly.
Yeah, so I've spent my career being a tech founder. I did a PhD in computer science. I've been a coder, software engineer, and I started tech companies. And during this sort of like tech cycle that's been going since about 2011, I founded one company that was really successful and one company that was not. And that's sort of what I was doing when the Israeli invasion happened and the genocide started. And I was, staring at social media, as we all were, every day, as babies were being blown up, and Israel was sniping kids and grannies in the head. And I wrote a blog post about it, and I guess it was a time that not a lot of people, and certainly no one in tech, was speaking up about it, and so that led to a lot of tech projects. So a lot of like people who were, felt suppressed, like they couldn't say anything, but they were building stuff to help in some way. And so we kind of came together in a Discord, launched a lot of those projects, and that happened in January this year, and that was the start of Tech for Palestine.
No, you're muted.
Oh.
Is this Israel?
There was it's the Mossad was doing that. I'm reminded of during another war on Gaza, a friend of mine actually started mapping. There was, efforts. There's been a lot of efforts around mapping, like where bombardments had been happening. And, they're like, this is not the first time. They're just such a great, rich, propelled by something incredibly sad and awful, but a rich legacy of a lot of tech workers who have done really innovative things to bring awareness and also support for the people of Palestine. But I'm just going to put up the website because it's great. This is Tech for Palestine, loose coalition of 8,000 plus founders, engineers, product marketers, community builders, investors, and other tech folks working towards Palestinian freedom. Okay, but let me ask you about what it meant for your work and for funding and for how do the chill that goes down people's spine if they speak out. I assume that tech is just like any other industry, and especially when you're trying to get seed money to get something off the ground or developing something, it must be even scarier. I don't know if you want to speak to that.
Yeah, absolutely. There's sort of two parts of tech. There's big tech, right? The Googles, Meta, all that sort of thing, and they're doing their own Zionism and their own pro-Israel stuff. But little tech is it's an area of startup founders, right? People often who have no connections are just coming into the industry and trying to figure things out. And the venture capital industry, so venture capitalists are the people who give you your first $1 million to start your startup. And then your next 10 million, then your next 100 million, and so on. And that industry is so pro-Israel. I was actually completely shocked by how pro-Israel it was, and to the point, actually, the connections between venture capital and Israel run incredibly deep. There's an entire ecosystem in Israel that they call themselves the startup nation, and they people go into the IDF. They take part in this sort of signal intelligence unit called Unit 8200. Then they come out, they found startups, then they get funded by Israeli or by venture capitalists both in the US and in Israel, and then they get acquired by American big tech, and then they cause people like you were talking about earlier from No Tech for Apartheid getting fired. It's a beautiful, cozy ecosystem that they've got going on, and in that ecosystem, founders absolutely could not speak up for Palestine. The founders that I spoke to in that time, felt that they were going to lose funding. It's hard to lose the funding that you have, but lose funding going forward.
In the
And the
in
thing
the
is that
future.
every tech company or every startup is 1 year away from death at most.
Uh-huh.
They have to raise money next year. They have to raise more money next year. And if they don't, they have to lay off like 3/4 of the team. And then all the dreams that they had of, generational wealth, or their, early employees being able to buy houses or
Mhm.
whatever it is, that's all gone. The thing they've been working on for 8 years, is gone.
Right, and it seems like there's, like,
Hmm.
money in developing new ways to, in our militaristic culture, spy on each other, figure out how to, like, again, using AI to kill people, as in Israel, and, we talked about that. I mean, mainstream news never talked about that, how imprecise they are. It's like, "Oh, it's not even better ways." It's just like, "Oh, I mean, again, like, in a lot of tech, it's just kind of hot air, and specifically, like, a lot of AI. But I did wanna then, because it is positive what is happening. So there are incubator projects on Tech for Palestine. This is just like a screenshot of it, but there's a bunch of them. One of them that I would love you to tell me about is something called Boycat. Shop ethically easily. It's an iPhone. It's an app, but also I think you can install it on your browser. Tell
Hmm.
me about these kinds of incubators like Boycat.
So Boycat was the first project to join the Tech for Palestine incubator. So we had brought in a bunch of projects, and we're sort of iterating and trying to figure out how to make them work.
Yeah,
And in about April, we figured out being an incubator was the model, and we would give startup advice, mentoring, volunteer support in a very hands-on manner. Like, we go out and find volunteers for these folks. So
amazing.
Boycat was one of the first in the door, and I think has been our most successful. They just recently had an official partnership with BDS, the Boycott and Divestment and Sanctions Movement, where they are now the official BDS app. And
That's
so
great.
what that kind of looks like is that we are, talking every week, in some cases when you're more mature, like Boycat, every few weeks, giving advice, helping people understand that, just because they had an idea, that isn't what it takes to get it out there. They have to have an audience. They have to figure out what is the thing that they're actually building. In a
Mm,
lot of cases, the thing that they come in with is not the thing that they leave with. And we exist to create that ecosystem of tens of, the goal is tens of thousands of pro-Palestinian initiatives. Because when you look at what Israel is doing, right?
mhm.
Israel has tens of thousands of hasbara initiatives. They're everywhere from the ADL and APAC down to your local school board. And
Right.
you can't counter that if you don't have people working together, if you don't have people being able to scale up teams quickly, if you don't have people who are sort of like working in a generally like manner, connected to the right people. And that's roughly what we're here to do.
And have you found, like, funders? Sorry, Gareth, you could feel free to jump in, but, like, what about, like, funding for this? And are there people who are giving to
So
support you?
far we have been almost entirely um, um, money free. And I
Okay.
think that was one of the uh, that was one of our founding tenets, that like we have the people, in a sense,
Mhm.
and so we,
And the
working on.
talent.
Exactly. So there's a lot of volunteers. We some projects have 20 volunteers working with them. But we are starting to put together funds. We've just put together our first two funds, or started raising our first two funds. And yeah, there's no problem. There's a lot of people with money who want to give it to Palestine, and who
Yeah.
don't know how to get it to useful people, especially in the tech industry. There's a lot of, there's a lot of wealthy tech people who are on the right side of things, who are progressive, or in the case of Palestine, who are Arab or Muslim, and who understand that what's happening is a genocide, and that it needs to be stopped, and that it's their responsibility to do it.
The app is great. I
Boycott.
had never. Well,
Did
what I love is there is something to knowing your, because again, it's like personal footprint stuff in some of these enormous issues is it's very helpful. Obviously, you need the people with power to do a lot, but the idea that you can see your total divestment personally, like play your own little video game of that, is will be gratifying. I think that tech, like even just based off what you're saying, is such a, I don't even want to say microcosm of government, but it's so similar in that you really need to back the people who are pure with their ideals and just hope that they don't change for their own survival. And I think that it's like when you look at AIPAC's influence on our government, it's genuinely, it's worse than you could even imagine.
Mhm.
And I think that people maybe view a lot of the stuff that's going on right now as like an over there problem, but when it comes to the tech stuff you're talking about, like so much of the evil tech that Israel is working on or practicing currently is coming here. It's like the
Yes.
Oh yeah.
bullpen. We are the bullpen for there, and they are the bullpen for here. And you're going to see that. And it's just, I think you get very used to like kind of the thinking that, government is evil, or that tech is against your best interests. But it
Tech
is,
is against you.
it is. And yet there are also the glimmers, like stuff like you're talking about, which is, refreshing,
I'm reminded of when TikTok like wanted everyone to call their senator, and so there was like a pop-up that was on TikTok that you could just like click and it would dial you into, your congressperson in terms of like to stop the banning of TikTok, which is of course whatever. I'm so done with their censorship regime, I'm going to call it. I'm just like so annoyed. But you're like, "Oh, that's actually possible." Is there other, like, what else beyond Boycat are you excited about that you guys are incubating? I don't know the terminology. I'm
it's pretty
sorry.
good.
Incubating is good. I mean, we are spending a lot of time trying to think about, what projects can we start? What does there need to exist? And a
Yeah.
lot of it comes down to the sort of hasbara movements that there's an awful lot. You mentioned TikTok, right? The connection between what Meta is doing and APAC fighting TikTok is leading to TikTok taking on Meta's policies, right? The anti-Zionism policy that Meta has has been added to TikTok recently. So it's really about trying to create well, let's call it categories. So we have our boycotting category, obviously. There's a media bias category. The media bias stuff is really interesting. We've a bunch of different projects that are working on highlighting, how news media uses passive voice and that sort of thing to to tell the story in an extremely biased way. We have a protest category, and that one's really interesting. We've got one launching this Thursday actually called Find a Protest at findaprotest.info. I'll let you guess what Find a Protest does. But yeah.
It's
Are
like
we in the guessing portion?
Shazam, but for plugs. That's what I want. To tell me
Yeah.
what plug that is. But no, that's dope. That's awesome. Sorry.
Not a bad
Right.
idea.
They have the Find a Protest project, which is not like, none of these projects are like run by Tech for Palestine. There are people that we bring in, coach, attach to volunteers. They have 20 projects or 20 volunteers going through everyone who does protests. They go through every one of their Instagram posts and they put it into a database and they put it onto our website. And if you go to findaprotest.info, you will find the protest that is near you.
Are you guys using like computer chips in order to do that? Because those are made in Israel. I just want to tell you that.
Yeah, no, it's frightening how much of the tech industry is like directly connected to Israel. We were talking to someone earlier who was trying to fight because a lot of the computer chips are made in Ireland, and Ireland and Israel are like diametrically opposed in
Sure.
their philosophy with colonialism. But the chips are coming from Israel and then they're being sent to Ireland, and that's a significant portion of Israel's exports.
Also
Ooh,
probably
I
gets
could
very confusing with the fish and stuff over there. Fish and
the
chips.
chips, yeah,
All right.
yeah,
No.
very
Paul,
confusing.
whatever.
I was gonna make a horribly off color joke, so I appreciate that. Stupid one.
All right. I feel like let's
Well, we got Paul to smile. You got Paul to smile. Um, Paul, tell me a little bit about, but just like more broadly, because I feel like you represent people we don't ever hear from, which is like you're saying, small tech, people who are actually doing the work and like,
Good
yeah,
tech.
have, yeah, and have like, aren't billionaires, but have had some success and also care. And I guess just beyond Palestine, although I really like the way that you are intricately linking, and I think we have to link just apartheid and genocide to, yes, these tech regimes that make money, that profit off of them, and how deeply entrenched we are militarily. But I love, yes, this tech piece is so critical. But I wanted to ask you about, like, I feel like the election of Donald Trump is sort of this coup for the VCs, for Peter Thiel, who's like, well, investing in my boy JD, that worked out. And, more and more as there's more billionaires whose names I never wanted to learn that we now know of.
In a good way.
Yeah, in a good way. Thank God. Like, I guess, what do you like, just maybe your thoughts on this culture and like, yeah, like I am
Mhm.
of the belief billionaires should not exist.
Yes.
Like, I
Sure.
really want you to succeed in whatever you're building, especially if it's pro-Palestine. But if you make $1 billion, Paul, I might have to tax you out of that. Because
Yeah,
eventually Paul will
definitely.
turn and become, not you, but you know what I'm saying? Like, give
Yeah,
me your
no,
thoughts.
I'm 1000% for eating the rich. I am nowhere close to a billionaire, so I'm not on the menu just yet. But wealth taxes, all that sort of thing. The concept of Silicon Valley is that tech people know better than you.
Yeah.
And they are uniquely smart in some sort of way that allows them to to understand the world in a way that plebs like you just don't get it, and it's fucking disgusting. The the tech. I mean, Peter Thiel, obviously one of the worst of these. But there's a huge like right wing tech movement.
Mhm.
San Francisco, in particular, in these elections, has gone very right wing, but it was going right wing for a while because all the rich tech people moved to San Francisco and they
Yeah.
started putting their money into right wing candidates. There was a huge movement against progressive politicians that tech was heavily in, or sorry, progressive district attorneys
Mhm.
that played out in
Yep.
San
Yeah.
Francisco.
Recalling Chesapeake or
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. And all of this was the same rich pricks that were taking their money and putting it into campaigns for things that they tied to the same sort of thing that we see in the rest of progressive politics, right? Homelessness being weaponized to put more money into military police, which then gets turned into um, the whole movement, obviously, for progressivism and Palestine are inherently tied, right?
yeah.
The right wing VCs who are putting money into Trump are also pro Israel. They're also pro weapons. There's this movement called American Dynamism, which is started by one of the big VCs, Mark Andreessen, which is just one of the most right wing movements that's happening, trying to get tech money, or trying to get defense money into tech, trying to start a lot more
Ugh.
defense companies, and to the point that one of these there's this really famous startup incubator called Y Combinator,
Mhm.
which was one of the things that was most responsible for the creation of the modern tech scene. And what are they investing in now? Cruise missiles. They're like,
Oh, good.
here's a fun cruise missile company that makes cruise missiles for much, much cheaper than previous cruise missile companies.
It's also
I think we
so
need to disrupt the cruise missile industry, utterly disrupt it, right?
yeah,
I've
shoot a
always said
missile
I've
through
always
it.
said that we should utterly disrupt the. Anyway, what, Gareth?
I just like, well, first of all, Peter Thiel's face is normal. But also it it's one of those things where it's like they it, it just Elon Musk becoming the level of figure that he has, I feel like has hurt the tech industry, because it felt for a while like I was even like, this guy's got to be smart. Now he's jumped into the spotlight on a level where you're like, wow, do you think,
Literally jumped.
yeah, do you think it's kind of, uh, do you think he's is he a damaging figure for tech? Do you think, the way that he is now, or is he, because he's got his bros, obviously. You have these people who just bootlick all day. But for people like me who have always been very suspicious of tech, I did think he's got to be sort of smart, but he just does seem like a big dumb fucking idiot.
I mean, I'm certainly in the big dumb fucking idiot camp, as goes Musk. My sense is that there was a tech cycle, right? It started in 2008 when everything crashed, all the money went out of tech, and so then 2009, 10, the people that you had building stuff were like, there was no money there. There was no, it was just like people building apps and trying to make shit happen. And then as you got towards the end of the cycle, closer to now, it became increasingly bootlicky around 2015, 2016. And then the crypto movement was this huge bootlicky moment. Everyone trying to be super rich and, literally scamming people. And then the AI movement is the same sort of thing. And the crypto people went straight into AI. And yeah, I mean, you have a movement of people who really do not give a shit about anything except getting rich. And that's an extremely Musk kind of world, and it's an extremely Peter Thiel kind of world. There's the idea that other people don't matter, we get ours. And tech, people say that tech is very left wing, and that's true, but only in the sense that a lot of workers are left wing, and not real left wing, but American left wing. The workers are left wing, but the funders are right wing, and the founders are former workers who are making a journey into the class consciousness with the right wing venture capitalists that they're trying to associate with. So it's like tech migrates with them, and I think tech has become increasingly right wing over the last 8 years, I'm going to say, and I think we're going to see it, go like Musk is a microcosm of the tech industry, essentially.
Paul, how can we support Tech for Palestine and what y'all are doing?
So one place is we need Tech for Palestine needs volunteers. We connect those volunteers into the projects. We have a ton of really cool projects that need people to use them. So sign up for Boycat, check out findaprotest.info. We have new projects that are coming out the wings. We have News Cord that does media bias. We have this really cool project that's so close to launching. It's called Jaywalk. And that's going to be the app that you use at protests to find where everything is. And I know it's going to be really cool. And you were asking earlier how like Trump is going to affect us. Well, one of the things is there's going to be a lot more protests, and we're building protest tech. So I hope that will be able to leverage strongly in the new.
And that is what we need, especially as we're leaving Twitter. As people are leaving, we need new ways of communicating, better, more effective, more targeted ways of communicating, and to exactly what we're doing. Right? If you're at a protest, or you need to find out where the action is or whatnot, and that's great. What's going on, Frantifa? If you haven't already, subscribe to this channel right now. Hit that button. And also, you can become a patron and support the show every single week. Get access to bonus episodes and exclusive merchandise. Patreon.com/Bitchuation Room. Do it.